Well, good morning. The main topic of conversation in the state capitol continues to be about Michigan's budget as that process continues to play out in Lansing. But there are other issues and concerns as state government works to keep Michigan moving forward. We'll talk about that this morning with someone who is in the center of those discussions. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, good morning. According to the Michigan Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan has three duties: to serve as the state's leader when the governor is temporarily or permanently unable to serve, to preside over the state Senate, and to serve on the state administrative board. But in fact, while the Lieutenant Governor fulfills those responsibilities, his or her role is often defined by the governor and the interests or background of the person in the Lieutenant Governor's seat. Our guest this morning is Michigan's 64th Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here with you, Don.
Very nice to have you with us. You know, what I'd like to do first is give me and our audience a chance to get to know you a little better.
Sure.
And I understand you grew up and still live in Detroit.
I do. I'm from Detroit. Very proud of that. My family, my wife and my three children in Detroit now. And I'm an engineer by training, a double engineering grad from the University of Michigan. Spent time as a software developer, spent time on both the West Coast and the East Coast before coming home 5 years ago to work in city government and also to try to help move election administration forward in Michigan and sort of work on issues like that. And now I'm proud to be the Lieutenant Governor alongside Gretchen Whitmer.
Let's explore a couple of those things in a little more detail. First of all, I think you had a baby just in June. Your wife had a baby in June, and you have twins and that young baby.
Yes, my baby girl Ruby is 3.5 months old, and I have twin 6-year-olds who were actually born on my birthday in 2013, and so we are very proud parents.
And I noticed somewhere in your bio that when you were 4 years old, you were speaking at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Detroit. Are you honing your political skills kind of early?
Well, I wouldn't call it political skills, but I am very comfortable speaking with people and connecting with people.
And I also read where you had your first computer when you were 5 years old.
Well, that is due to the vision of my grandmother. She knew that her baby needed to have a computer, and when she bought me that, I was the first kid on my block in Detroit to have a computer. And that opened the door for me to be able to learn about technology and made me confident that I can make technology do whatever I wanted it to do. And that's what led to my career in engineering, my degrees in software development, and ultimately still believing that technology, when used in the right way, can really solve problems.
So you became a techie at 5 years old?
Pretty much.
Pretty well stuck with you?
These kinds of things never leave you. It's kind of like riding a bike.
And I did also learn that you went to a camp at Michigan Tech when you were a young person.
I did. So the summer between my 10th and 11th grade year, I had the pleasure of working or being part of the Detroit area pre-college engineering program, summer youth program at Michigan Tech. So me and 60 other kids got on a bus at Cass Tech University in Detroit, drove 18 hours up to Michigan Tech's campus, and I got a chance to spend 5 or 6 days living in the dorms, going to classes on campus. And it was a really phenomenal, informative experience that helped me solidify the fact that I wanted to be a computer engineer.
And you went to the University of Michigan, as you mentioned. You went to work for Microsoft. Did you kind of see that as your career path then, that you were going to be a software engineer?
Yes, my life plan was to work at Microsoft, to then go to business school back here at University of Michigan, and then start some kind of software business, you know, but life happens, and I was able to volunteer on President Obama's campaign. I ended up working on that campaign. I ended up leaving Microsoft, actually. I quit the week before I got married to my wife of now 10 years. And we moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked in the political space for about 5 years before coming back home. But I never saw myself in elected office, but I did believe that I learned things in different parts of the country that could be in service to the people of Michigan.
Tell us about that service with the Obama campaign. What was that about?
I ran the social media effort in Washington State, but I think most importantly, I was able to work with the team nationally to create a text messaging program to recruit people to volunteer on the campaign, which was the first time that had ever happened in a presidential. And I think it was a good example of using technology to pull new people into the political process. And so I certainly want people to always be involved and engaged, and we have to use whatever tools we have at our disposal to make that possible.
And I know that you were I'm looking for the title, Executive Director of the Center for Social Media Responsibility at the University of Michigan. What was that about?
Yes, so in 2018, I was the founding executive director of the Center for Social Media Responsibility at the School of Information at the University of Michigan. And what that was about was fake news and Facebook. Essentially, how do we deal with these companies like Facebook and Google? They have public responsibilities because so many people use their platforms for so many things. So how do they deal with misinformation and disinformation, and what can they do to make sure people have good experiences and they actually advance learning and dialogue rather than just incivility?
Okay, let's talk about being the Lieutenant Governor. As I mentioned, your responsibilities, some are spelled out, including being the presiding officer over the Senate. And
yes.
One of the Detroit newspapers mentioned that, unlike many lieutenant governors, you didn't have that experience before you came there. So have you finished that on-the-job training?
That's a little while. I spent a lot of time during the transition, making sure that I was ramped up on Senate procedure, Senate rules, Senate precedents, and have also had the benefit of working with my predecessors, both Brian Calley and John Cherry, who've been very open and generous with their time and experience to make sure that I was prepared on day one of Senate session this January to be able to preside. And it's been a really fantastic experience working with the senators in that regard, and it's also given me a chance to keep my eye on some people that may need their eyes.
Right. And as I mentioned too, with each lieutenant governor, it kind of depends on what the person they're serving with needs and what their particular interests are. And how are you and Governor Whitmer sorting that out as far as the role you're filling for her?
Well, the governor has been an amazing partner to work with, and so in the midst of our broader agenda, in the context of that agenda, I've been able to work on some really key things. One is connecting our communities, so thinking about transit and transportation, thinking about access to the internet through broadband and high-speed internet access, ensuring that we can have real reforms to our system of criminal justice so people can experience justice rather than being thrown away. Enabling people with ideas and entrepreneurs all across the state in different forms. So these are some of the areas that I've been focused on, and this as part of my portfolio, if you will, and It's been a really good experience thus far to make progress on those. Okay,
we'll talk about some more of those in detail after a couple of minutes. We're going to take a break. Back with more on today's show just 2 minutes from now. Our guest this morning is Michigan's Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. You know, we had a pleasant conversation about who you are. Now we have to talk about budgets, which is kind of an unpleasant subject. And, you know, and I have to say, I think a lot of observers are noting that we're kind of at this stage now where it appears to be kind of some political gamesmanship. And I'm not laying this all on the governor. I mean, this kind of works both ways. And the governor, of course, vetoed some items, and people have speculated, well, part of that was hopefully to get some Republicans back to the negotiating table, and yet here we are today. They haven't taken that bait as yet. Where do you think we're going, and where does the governor think we're going?
Well, we absolutely are looking forward to continued negotiations about the budget, because that's how this process is supposed to work. We introduced our budget proposal back in March of this year, and we have been awaiting things like a long-term road funding plan as well as broader budget negotiation opportunities, but the Republicans hadn't come to the table before. They sent us a budget that we did not negotiate, and we had to take actions to fix or respond to some very broken and fundamentally flawed budgets. There were parts of it that were unenforceable. They gutted departments like the Department of Technology Management and Budget, a department that puts our cybersecurity at risk. So people's social security numbers who have to get government services are at risk of hacking, which we hear about almost every other day on the news. And so we had to take some pretty drastic steps to fix these problems and respond to those broken budgets that we were sent. But yes, we are back at the table. We got to work on the supplemental the day after we took our action. The day after that, we had another meeting of the quadrant, which is all 4 legislative leaders, meeting with the governor and I to begin talking about how we move forward. And so we're looking forward to that process happening expeditiously so we can get back to the business of governing.
There are some issues. For example, a small school district up here called Burt Township feels they would have to close, you know, unless something changes now. Pure Michigan, that campaign could end unless, of course, there are some changes in that supplemental budget, deputies being laid off. What's the likelihood that Republicans will come back to the table and negotiate with the governor on these issues?
Well, I think it's a good question for the Republicans, but we have certainly been clear from March that we are ready to negotiate. And, you know, if you want to get a sense of what our priorities are, what we think is important for the people of Michigan, you can look no further than that proposal that we made back in March that had a once-in-a-generation investment in public education and other things, because we believe that this is how we need to move the state of Michigan forward. So I think that Republicans are going to want to come back to the table because we need to accomplish these things, and everything's on the table. This is a negotiation process, and budgets are intended to be negotiated. So we're looking forward to do that. They came and met with us during our quadrant meeting this past Thursday. We expect to see them back at the table again, and I believe we can work this out. And we have been clear that we got started working on the supplemental the day after we took action, and we're going to keep working on it until we get something done.
You know, as someone who's observed the Michigan political scene for a long time, it seems pretty clear to me that the issue really is money. I mean, we focus on education or roads or whatever it might be, but it comes down to money. And even though Michigan has a $60 billion budget, it's not enough to take on any new priorities. Republicans refuse to raise taxes. Democrats feel that they may have to find some new sources of revenue. Is that a fair assessment?
It is absolutely fair, and it's agreed upon consensus that we need new revenue to solve our problems. So even the Senate Majority Leader has been clear that we need new revenue, Mike Shirkey said, and there's consensus that we need $2.5 billion every year to fix our roads problem. And if we raise that revenue in the right way, it enables us to make a once-in-a-generation investment in education. So I think your characterization is a fair one, but now everyone needs to be at the table and accept that reality and work towards a solution.
And of course, the governor proposed a 45-cent per gallon tax increase, and that did not go well, even in the Democratic Legislative Caucus. Is it likely Republicans will come up with an answer, or are the Democrats going to have to put some ideas on the table?
Well, the Republicans have promised an answer on road funding for March, April, May, June, July, August, September. We're in October, and we still have not seen a road funding plan from them. So we continue to wait for it. And in the meantime, we've been very clear that we are not married to any particular pathway to get to $2.5 billion of new revenue, but we need to get there. And so we're open to ideas. We've been waiting for them to come to the negotiating table, but they haven't done that in a serious way.
Representative Cambenzi, who's from this district,
Yes.
the Democrat,
Yes.
has suggested on this show last week that perhaps a return to some type of increase in the corporate income tax might be an answer. Is that something the governor might consider?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of ways to get to $2.5 billion. We're not married to a particular one, so if people have proposals, we'd be happy to see them put forward.
Let's talk quickly about what you're doing now. You're on something called the Thriving Cities Tour.
Yes.
What's that about?
So a lot of people in Michigan live in cities, and they live in different types of cities. And so we want to improve quality of life for people who live in any kind of city across the state of Michigan. So the governor and I are personally facilitating conversations in 17 cities across the state, including Marquette, where we're talking about how we can improve life in 5 key areas: kids in cities, transportation and mobility, environmental quality and justice, affordable and available housing, and generational economic opportunity. So we're convening these conversations with people in these communities and in these cities who are doing work to make life better in those areas, hoping that we can come up with a collectively set agenda from all 17 of these cities that we can advocate for action at the local level, at the state level through executive action or legislation, or we can advocate for federal policy changes to improve the quality of life of cities in Michigan. So I'm very excited about this process. We've done 7 meetings thus far, and we'll be finishing up in about the second week of November, and then get to work on this set of policy proposals that people will advocate for.
Okay, I'll have some more questions in just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. We were talking with Lieutenant Governor Governor Gilchrist this morning, and before the break we were chatting about the Thriving Cities Tour. I just wondered, I assume it's kind of a talking and listening.
It is more of a listening than a talking tour, absolutely. We invited people to come to the table, normally who don't have audience with the governor or lieutenant governor directly, and wanting to hear from them. These are the people who are trying to make progress in these areas, so we believe they're the people who are closest to the solutions to the challenges that we face in these areas. So we're listening to them. It's a listening tour.
Are you surprised at all by any of the things you're hearing?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised by the creativity of ideas. So people have talked about everything from zoning policy changes to things they want to see the state government continue to do in terms of like everything from youth employment to educational opportunities. But we're going to hear, I think, a lot of great things, and that's why we're going to so many different cities, because every city's not the same. Marquette has different challenges than Detroit, has different challenges than Ben Harbor or Bay City. And so we want to make sure that we're getting exposed to all these cities and all the conversations that need to be happening locally.
Are you talking about the fact that in many cities jobs is the problem, and And the problem is many people aren't qualified for the jobs that are available.
Well, we certainly tried to address this challenge in our budget. You know, when talking about how do we close the skills gap, how do we make sure that people have access to training, that they can afford to get training through programs like our Michigan Reconnect program, which will provide tuition-free pathways to types of training. But people have talked about other things as well, like affordable housing being a challenge in cities like Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor, or being concerned about opportunities for kids in cities in a place like Benton Harbor. So we've seen a pretty broad array of both issues and solutions come up from these tourist stops.
I know one of the areas you mentioned you're interested in is criminal justice reform. What are some of the issues there that you're looking at?
So I'm the co-chair of a task force on pretrial incarceration along with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And what's been really interesting is we have this partnership with the Pew Charitable Trust, and they're giving us technical assistance to do the deepest dive into the county jail system in the history of the state of Michigan. And we are understanding why county jail populations are what they are. You know, in some counties we have seen pretty gross overpopulation in our jails. So we're looking at how we can target investments toward diversion programs, how we can deal with the cash and money bail system as a way to have us not lock people up because they don't have enough money to get out of jail. How can we make sure people have better access to mental health and substance abuse services rather than getting those while they are incarcerated? We feel like if we can address these challenges, people will be treated with more dignity and humanity, and our counties will save money because it costs a lot to operate a jail, and especially one that's overpopulated. So we've been looking at solutions there. The task force has 21 members. It's a diverse group of people who are lawmakers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, formerly incarcerated people, legislators, judges, all at the table to build solutions.
What about providing internet access for people in rural areas of Michigan? It's very good in some areas, but not so good in others.
Well, I'm spending time during this trip to the UP meeting with companies who are currently providing internet services, but also wanting to challenge other members of the community to expand access to that service. It's a really important opportunity because if you have access to the internet, that is the kind of enabling infrastructure that helped a kid like me when I was in Detroit be able to imagine and dream the things that I could dream and what I could do with my career. So we've done things that we put out a $25 million RFP process about innovative partnerships in expanding access to the internet in rural communities. We've encouraged Michigan companies and nonprofits and partnerships to apply for federal resources that are available through the U.S. Department of Agriculture to provide broadband infrastructure to rural communities. And so we're certainly encouraging more people, more communities to step up and find those resources, and we're going to make sure that they have a good partner in the state of Michigan.
We have less than a minute left, but social media has obviously become very important in our lives. Yet there's some concerns about the social media companies and the data they're dealing with, and you know, are we going to get control of all that?
I mean, I think that we certainly need to rethink how these companies, what they have power over and what we have power over as people, power over our information, power over the data that we share. It's really ours and we should own it, and they should not be the arbiters of it. So I think you're going to see a realignment of the relationship between people, their data, and these social media companies, and I think frankly it's the right direction to go for the industry.
Well, it's very nice to get to meet you.
Good to meet you, Don.
And glad to have you here in the UP, and
Yes.
Hopefully the rest of your visit is interesting for you.
I'm very excited about it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. When Governor Whitmer was our guest earlier this year, we closed the show with some interesting facts about past governors of Michigan. Today I thought we could do the same by providing some lieutenant governor history. While Gretchen Whitmer is the 49th governor of Michigan, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is the 64th lieutenant governor. Why the difference? Well, there are several reasons, including because some governors who served multiple terms did not have the same lieutenant governor through the duration of their service. For example, Governor Menon Williams served 6 terms and had 5 separate lieutenant governors. Another factor is that for many years, the lieutenant governors ran separately from the governors. As a result, some were from a different party than the governor. That changed when Michigan rewrote the Constitution in 1963. The first time the governor and lieutenant governor ran as a team was in 1966. You know, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, UP politicians didn't think they were getting enough representation. So to placate them, the lieutenant governors from 1897 to 1907 were all from the Upper Peninsula. After Charles Osborne, who started his political career in Sault Ste. Marie, was elected governor in 1810, the practice ended. Until this date, 5 lieutenant governors have succeeded to the governor's chair during the term of the governor they were serving, with perhaps the most notable in that group was Lurin Dickinson, who served a record 7 times under governors of both parties, and who is the only lieutenant governor to move into the governor's chair because of the death of a governor. He succeeded Frank Fitzgerald, the only Michigan governor who died in office. The other lieutenant governors gained the office due to the governor resigning, usually to take another position. You know, throughout its history, Michigan has had only 2 female governors, while 3 women have served as lieutenant governor. However, only 2 were elected. How can that be? Well, the first was appointed, and once again the name Lurin Dickinson is part of the story. When he succeeded to the governor's chair, he appointed Matilda Dodge Wilson. She became not only Michigan's first lieutenant governor, but also the first in the nation. She was also probably the wealthiest, having inherited half the money from the sale of the Dodge Brothers Auto Company. The only 2 women who have been elected lieutenant governor in Michigan actually served back-to-back terms. The first was Martha Wright Griffiths, a Democrat who served with Governor James Blanchard. Griffiths had a distinguished career before serving as lieutenant governor and was also the first woman elected to the U.S. Congress from Michigan. The second female was Republican Connie Barabee Binsfeld, who served with Governor John Engler for 2 of his 3 terms. She decided not to seek a 3rd term with Engler. What made Binsfeld special to us is that she was born and grew up in Munising. Finally, and I don't have the proof to back this up, but I'm pretty certain our current lieutenant governor is the tallest person to ever hold that office. At 6'8", he pretty well towers over me. I'll be back in a minute. Before we wrap it up for this morning, let me remind you that if you miss our show, you can see it on UpperMichiganSource.com. It's available as a live stream during the day on Sunday, and current and past episodes can be found under the Ryan Report banner anytime. Thanks to Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist for joining us this morning. It was good to get to know him and to get his perspective on developments in Lansing. And thank you for being here. Let's get together again next Sunday morning.